It was in the winter of 1944, amid one of the most desperate offensives of the entire war, that German frontline commanders began sending back frantic messages that baffled even the experienced officers of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. They were not reporting new Allied air raids. They were not reporting breakthroughs in the line. They were reporting trucks. Reports circulated through German headquarters that American supply trucks were arriving at the front faster than German forces could destroy them. In some sectors, German infantry watching through shattered tree lines swore they had blown bridges, cratered roads, or set up ambush, only to watch fresh columns of American vehicles appear again within hours as if conjured from thin air. This shocking reality was not a myth. It was the result of one of the most decisive logistical transformations in modern warfare, the United States. Mastery of motorized supply powered by trucks like the GM-CCCKW Deuce-and-a-Half, the Studebaker US-6, and a logistical doctrine that dwarfed anything the Wehrmacht could deploy in 1944. To understand the shock, one must start earlier in the war. The German army, despite its reputation for lightning war and mechanized offensives, was never fully motorized. In 1941, during the invasion of the Soviet Union, the Wehrmacht operated with over 600,000 horses compared to only about 120,000 trucks. Even in 1944, on the supposedly modern Western Front, German divisions relied heavily on horseback and foot marching for transport, particularly in infantry formations. Meanwhile, the United States, protected by two oceans and powered by Ankawa, industrial base unmatched in human history, was producing hundreds of thousands of standardized military trucks every year. Between 1941 and 1945, American factories would build over 2.3 million military trucks, more than all other major combatants combined. By the time American forces landed in Normandy in June 1944, this imbalance was no longer just a statistic. It was a tactical weapon. After the breakout from Normandy in late July and August 1944, triggered by Operation Cobra, American and British forces accelerated across France, moving faster than their planners had expected. By early September, they were outrunning their supply lines. Ports were still damaged from German sabotage, especially at Cherbourg and Le Havre. Railways were ruined and most bridges had been blown. Yet the Allied advance kept going. And it was this moment that created the logistical phenomenon that German troops later spoke about with disbelief: the Red Ball Express. Formally launched on August 25, 1944, the Red Ball Express was a round-the-clock, high-priority truck network that delivered gasoline, ammunition, food, and spare parts to the rapidly advancing Allied armies. It operated on closed-loop road systems reserved almost entirely for military supply trucks. At its peak, nearly 6,000 trucks operated daily. Over 23,000 drivers ran missions, many of them African-American servicemen of segregated transportation units. Trucks moved up to 12,000 tons of supplies every 24 hours. Convoys stretched for miles, spaced at strictly enforced intervals to prevent bottlenecks. Military police controlled traffic with near absolute authority, and the trucks kept coming, day and night, in rain, fog, and darkness. German troops observing. American advances in August and September 1944 had no concept for this scale of motorized supply. Many German supply officers still relied on carts pulled by horses, vehicles with mismatched spare parts, or trucks from the 1930s long past their operational life. German commanders attempted sabotage on bridges, ambush on key roads, and artillery strikes at choke points. But they faced three overwhelming problems. American industrial strength. The U.S. could replace trucks faster than Germany could destroy them. If a convoy lost 10 or 20 vehicles, replacements were already en route. Allied air superiority. By late 1944, The Luftwaffe was a shadow of its former self. German aircraft could not reliably attack the convoys, which often ran under daylight skies dominated by Allied fighters. German fuel shortages, even when units tried to mount mobile counterattacks, they frequently lacked the gasoline to sustain them. Some German armored units sat idle while American trucks rolled past just miles away. As one German officer bitterly wrote after the war, "The Americans fought with gasoline. We fought with sweat." The German high command was counting on American supply lines being fragile, believing that if they could break through and capture fuel depots during the Ardennes offensive in December 1944, they could stall the Allied armies. But what stunned them was how rapidly American supply trucks returned to operation once the counterattack was contained. Despite chaos in the early days of the Battle of the Bulge, the U.S. Army rerouted convoys, shifted supply depots, and reopened critical road networks with astonishing speed. German forces reported destroying large amounts of fuel and seizing temporary control of crossings and junctions, only to see new truck convoys appear mere hours after American units retook the roads. The speed of American logistical recovery was something the Wehrmacht had no answer for. By January 1945, German intelligence analysts quietly admitted what many frontline soldiers already knew: the United States logistics, not just its tanks or planes, made it unstoppable. To the German soldiers fighting on the Western Front, the American truck column seemed to defy the realities of war. Roads cratered by artillery, bridges splintered by retreating engineers, towns reduced to rubble, none of it seemed to stop the arrival of new convoys. But behind this phenomenon lay one of the most sophisticated logistical systems ever built. By 1944, the United States had turned transportation into a battlefield weapon. It was a system powered by standardized vehicles, dedicated supply corridors, and an industrial base capable of outproducing the Axis many times over. Understanding why German troops were astonished requires examining the inner workings of American logistics, how the trucks were built, how the system was organized, and how it evolved under the pressures of combat. In World War I, the United States had learned a painful lesson. Dozens of truck types, each requiring different parts, mechanics, and maintenance, caused chaos. In the interwar years, the U.S. Army Ordnance Department solved this problem with a simple, revolutionary idea: standardize everything. By 1941, the U.S. had committed to a uniform family of 2.5-ton and 1.5-ton trucks, particularly the GM-CCKW Deuce-and-a-Half, the Studebaker US-6, the Dodge WC Series, the Chevrolet G506. These vehicles shared parts, tools, manuals, and maintenance procedures. This meant that a mechanic trained on one model could repair almost all. German divisions, in contrast, were plagued with an impossible variety of captured French, Soviet, Czech, and civilian vehicles. A single German unit might have trucks requiring dozens of different spare parts, many unavailable due to Allied bombing. The Americans built their trucks in such massive numbers that they became a weapon in their own right. The U.S. produced more trucks than Germany, Italy, and Japan combined. In fact, American output was so large that Washington supplied tens of thousands of vehicles to Britain, and the Soviet Union through Lend-Lease, including Studebaker trucks that would later pull Soviet Katyusha rocket launchers. The disparity was so vast that by 1944, American commanders could afford something the Wehrmacht could not: loss tolerance. If a truck broke down, it could be towed, abandoned, or cannibalized. A new one could be delivered in days. To German soldiers, American mobility felt supernatural, but it was rooted in three interlocking pillars: fuel, roads, and manpower. 1. Fuel. The lifeblood of American military-powered Germany entered the war with a chronic fuel shortage. By 1944, Romania's oil fields were bombed. Synthetic fuel plants were failing, and armored divisions rationed gasoline by the liter. American forces had the opposite problem: too much fuel. Massive tanker fleets crossed the Atlantic, and pipelines built in Britain before D-Day allowed rapid transfer to the continent. In the weeks after Normandy, portable jerrycan dumps held millions of gallons of fuel, guarded as carefully as ammunition. This simple truth shaped the war. German tanks often couldn't reach battle. American trucks could reach anywhere. It wasn't just an advantage, it was a strategic weapon. 2. The Allied road system. Planned like an artery network, the Red Ball Express was only the beginning. Other systems followed: the White Ball Route, the Green Diamond Network, the XYZ corridors designated for winter operations. Military engineers rebuilt French roads at staggering speed. Bulldozers cleared rubble. Combat engineers repaired bridges that German forces had blown. Temporary structures like Bailey bridges could be erected in hours, something German observers noted with disbelief. By late September 1944, Allied engineers had repaired over 2,000 bridges and tens of thousands of kilometers of road. 3. Manpower. The often forgotten drivers. While tanks and planes dominate the popular memory of the war, the logistics force behind them was monumental. In the U.S. Army, nearly 1 million soldiers served in logistics roles. Tens of thousands were African American soldiers operating trucks, depots, and maintenance battalions. Drivers worked under constant strain. Fatigue, accidents, enemy fire, and winter conditions. These soldiers lived on coffee, rations, and the adrenaline of unbroken schedules. Their work was dangerous enough that some Red Ball Express truck companies suffered casualty rates comparable to frontline units. Their sacrifice created the phenomenon German soldiers observed: trucks that simply never stopped. In captured German diaries and after-action reports from late 1944, repeated comments appear. The Americans move too quickly. Their trucks are everywhere. They replace losses in hours, not days. It is impossible to cut their supply lines. One particularly revealing report came from General Gunther Blumentritt, a senior officer who had served since the invasion of Poland. After observing the Allied advance from Normandy to the German border, he concluded, "Their strength lies not only in material, but in the speed with which it is delivered." The German High Command, which had relied on lightning war early in the conflict, was now facing an enemy who had perfected something else entirely: lightning logistics. While German columns were slowed by fuel shortages, mechanical failures, and lack of spare parts, American truck convoys traveled in an organized rhythm that could not be suppressed. Even when German units attempted localized attacks, especially during the Ardennes offensive, American supply systems adapted with breathtaking efficiency. The Wehrmacht had underestimated not just American industry, but American logistics doctrine. By the start of 1945, the German High Command could no longer deny what its frontline troops had been reporting since the summer of the previous year: the American ability to keep its army supplied continuously, rapidly, and in overwhelming volume had become one of the most decisive factors of the war. Weapons could be replaced, tanks could be rebuilt. But a logistical system of the scale the United States deployed in Western Europe was something the Wehrmacht could neither match nor disrupt. German soldiers, many of them veterans of the early Blitzkrieg triumphs, now watched as American trucks flowed forward in a steady, unstoppable rhythm. It was a reversal of roles. In 1939 and 1940, German forces had been the ones racing ahead, leaving stunned opponents behind. By 1944 and 1945, it was the U.S. Army that moved with a speed and consistency the Germans could not comprehend. And it all came down to logistics. The last German attempt to break the Allied advance, the Ardennes offensive, launched on December 16, 1944, was designed around a single objective: capturing American fuel. German planners were brutally honest in their assessments. Without Allied gasoline, the offensive could not be sustained. Every mile of the planned advance had been measured against available fuel reserves. The entire outcome depended on taking American depots intact. This dependency was symbolized by the now famous episode involving Kampfgruppe Peiper, a spearhead unit of the 1st SS Panzer Division. Led by Joachim Peiper, it pushed deep into American lines, capturing fuel dumps at Bullingen and Stavelot, but never enough to sustain the offensive. Peiper's tanks were forced to halt not because of U.S. resistance, but because of empty fuel tanks. When German forces began to withdraw in early January 1945, Peiper's elite armored group abandoned over 100 vehicles, including Tiger tanks, not due to enemy fire but because they had simply run dry. Meanwhile, American supply trucks rerouted away from threatened roads and reorganized. Within hours, resumed deliveries even while the battle raged. Within days of stabilizing the line, the U.S. 1st and 3rd Armies were receiving ammunition, winter gear, fuel replacement vehicles, food, medical supplies, all via truck convoys restored with a speed that shocked German intelligence. In post-war interrogations, several German officers admitted that the failure to disrupt American logistics played a central role in the collapse of the Ardennes offensive. General Hasso von Manteuffel, commander of the 5th Panzer Army, later stated, "They brought up supplies with unbelievable speed. Our own supply lines failed. Theirs did not." As the Allies crossed the Rhine in March 1945, using among other feats the unexpected capture of the Remagen Bridge on March 7th, German forces were again stunned at the American ability to push forward fresh troops and supplies within hours. The American advance was not just fast, it was continuous. In April 1945, U.S. Army Group commanders under General Omar Bradley executed one of the fastest envelopments in modern military history: the encirclement of the Ruhr Valley, Germany's last industrial heartland. To maintain the speed of the double envelopment, American logistics officers executed the daily movement of tens of thousands of gallons of fuel, mobile repair shops that could restore damaged trucks in minutes, rapid extension of supply lines as the encirclement tightened, non-stop ferrying of ammunition for Patton's and Hodges units, the use of forward supply dumps that leapfrogged behind the advancing front. German defenders, cut off and exhausted, held fortified positions, but soon discovered that American units surrounding them were receiving constant resupply, as if the destruction of roads and bridges had no effect. LT General Fritz Bayerlein, who had fought in Africa, Normandy, and the Ardennes, described the American logistical machine with admiration and disbelief. The principal difference between our armies and the American Army was mobility. Their divisions were kept fueled, fed, and ready. We could not do this. Within weeks, the Ruhr pocket collapsed. Over 300,000 German soldiers surrendered, the largest mass surrender of German forces in the Western Front. For many of them, their final days of fighting were marked by the same realization that had haunted them since Normandy. American trucks arrived faster than they could destroy them. Historians agree that several structural realities made this disparity inevitable. 1. Industrial scale. The U.S. produced trucks, spare parts, and fuel in quantities Germany could not approach. Even if the Wehrmacht had destroyed thousands more trucks, American replacements would have still arrived. 2. Standardization. The U.S. Army's standardized truck fleet meant maintenance was fast, predictable, and scalable. German logistics, in contrast, were slowed by incompatible parts and improvised repairs. 3. Fuel availability. America's access to global oil and efficient refining ensured virtually limitless gasoline. Germany's reliance on synthetic fuel and dwindling oil fields made sustained mobility impossible. 4. Trained logistics personnel. The U.S. Army deliberately trained specialists in transportation, supply chain management, engineering, and maintenance, functions Germany often neglected while prioritizing combat formations. 5. Doctrine. U.S. commanders viewed logistics as a decisive component of warfare. The Wehrmacht understood its importance but never built systems capable of mass, high-speed sustainment. In the end, the German troops who watched American truck columns roll endlessly forward were witnessing a fundamental truth of modern warfare. Battles are decided by strategy, courage, and weapons, but wars are decided by logistics. The U.S. Army's ability to push supplies forward faster than Germany could destroy them was not merely a battlefield advantage. It was the manifestation of a national industrial miracle. Factories in Michigan and Ohio, ports in New York and Norfolk, and assembly lines across the country had already shaped the outcome long before soldiers met on the Western Front. German divisions fought with determination, skill, and experience, but they fought from a logistical deficit that no amount of bravery could overcome. And so the lesson of the Western Front in 1944-45 remains as clear today as it was to those German soldiers staring in disbelief at endless American convoys. In modern war, the side that keeps moving wins, and the side that keeps supplying never stops moving.